Welcome. Welcome to AVOR, a platform dedicated to exploring the shared human experience. Though we each walk unique paths, our journeys are connected by universal threads. At AVOR, we embrace the belief that we are all a part of one collective consciousness. Welcome to AVOR. Get snuggled in. I think you're gonna love it here. You're gonna love it here.
Welcome back to another episode of AVOR Podcast, and I am your lovely host, Wasila Giwa, okay? AVOR is short for A Voice of Reason Podcast, and I just want to welcome you guys back. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you guys so much for supporting, whether you're watching a clip online, or you're watching me on YouTube, or you're watching me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, listening in. I just want to say I appreciate you guys so much. So thank you guys so much for the support. This episode, I'm really excited about this episode. I actually had another episode planned, but I felt in my spirit that it's important to have these conversations. So the title of this episode is The Art of Setting Boundaries, okay? So my journey to setting boundaries has been a long one, okay? It has been a long one, but I'm happy to be in the space that I'm in now. So growing up for me, I feel like y'all gonna hear me talk a lot about my childhood because we tend to forget a lot of the experiences that mold us to who we are now happens in those critical ages of like everything between 13 and back. Those are the things that really form us and how we have lack of boundaries or have boundaries, or how we see ourselves, how we the lack of self-respect we have for ourselves, and vice versa. Those are the formative years that really cultivate who we are. And you see it in society, you see it in people everywhere you go, because you can see where a person is emotionally stopped at or stumped at. And so you're going to hear me talk a lot about going back to like my formative years and my experiences then. But really, that's where the lack of boundaries cultivated for me. So growing up, at a very young age, I was diagnosed with ADHD. Was in therapy for it, put on Ritalin. Lord, Ritalin had me crashing out in a corner somewhere. And so I already felt ostracized. I already kind of felt different. I felt like something was wrong with me. I just had so much energy, right? And my mom didn't know what to do with me. The schools didn't know what to do with me. Like, there was definitely some points. I definitely did get expelled from a couple of schools. But we're not going to talk about that. But I just had a lot of ball of energy, and I felt like I was so misunderstood. I felt like I learned differently. I was just differently the chemistry in my brain was different, and it's so crazy because now in modern time, there is so many, we have so much language for the things that they didn't have language for back then. You know what I'm saying? Like, what they say, neurodivergent, like, those weren't words that I heard back then. Probably wasn't old enough to know what that word meant anyway, but they have just so many things, so much language for the experiences that many people are having. And so I just remember growing up and always feeling the need to want to be a part, want to be chose, want to be people's friends. Like, I was the friendly, bubbly girl. And it's so crazy because I feel like I've changed. I still am that, but I've definitely changed a lot. And so I just remember wanting to fit in, wanting to be a part. And no matter how much I tried, I could not fit in. And it's so funny. It's this one time that my grandmother, she told me about an incident that happened to me when I was incident that happened when I was in like first grade, and they had called her and my mother down to the school. And they were like, we just cannot control Wasila. She's taking over the class, and we just can't get her to sit down. And all of the students are following everything that she says to do. And they come into the classroom, and nonetheless, I have all the students doing every single thing that I'm telling them to do. Now, in my opinion, I think that I was just exuding leadership capabilities. You see what I'm saying? At a very young age. However, the principal, the teacher may have not saw it as that way. So I possibly did get in trouble. I did get in trouble. So I just was a different type of child. Okay. And I think that's why I'm so much of an advocate for children as it pertains to education, and realizing for people to realize that all children do not learn the same. And just because a child is diagnosed with ADHD does not mean that they don't have the capability to learn like everybody else in the school on the same grade level. And so maybe on another episode, I'll get into how I end up advocating for myself in the school system, and a lot of the things that I had to do to make sure that I was receiving the education that I knew was right for me. But nonetheless, all those things attributed to a sense of me feeling as if I wasn't good enough, right? So you ask, how does that go into and segue into boundaries, right? I had a hard time with creating boundaries with friendships, with family, with possible romantic relationships, because I always had this thought that, well, if you love someone, you just go over and beyond. You give, and you don't think about how you give. You just give. You just show up. You love people, and of course, people are going to love you, because why wouldn't you love me if I'm loving you, right? Just this naive idea of like thinking, right? And so in friendships, we're going to start off with friendships. And friendships, how that showed up was meeting people who only wanted to use me for the parts that they wanted to use me for, right? And that looks like, right, so they know that I may have money or something like that, and I'm willing to, because I'm wanting to have friends, I'm willing to spend that money on them, right? Because I'm like, well, they don't have it, so I have it, right? Or a friend needing, being in a bad space, living situation, or anything that they may be going through, I'm willing to be like, well, you can come over and I'll ask my grandparents, or I'll ask my grandma if you can come stay. Like, you don't have to be a part of that situation. Always trying to problem solve for people, right? And it created unhealthy dynamics in my friendships, because I had to realize that people didn't necessarily like me for me. They liked for what I could provide to them, right? I can't remember that saying, but basically people can fall in love with the idea of you, but don't have the propensity to handle the reality of who you are. And so I ran into that, whether that was in platonic relationships or romantic relationships. I always had a lot to give. I always had a lot to offer. I always was very forthcoming. And then that's another thing. I was always honest. And so I had to realize, like, at a point, not everybody, Wasila, is as honest as you is. Not everybody is as forthcoming as you is. Not everybody has the same motives as you is. And I honestly had this belief that, well, if I showed up being authentic and being true and giving all of this love, like, how can you reject this love? Like, how can you reject someone who genuinely wants to love you and someone who genuinely wants to support you, right? But something that I also had to realize in my over performance of love is that I was running from parts of myself. I was running from the pain that I was feeling. I was running from dealing with the hurt of losing my mother. I was running from the hurt of dealing with the issues with my family. I was running from dealing with identifying certain things within myself, right? And so while I was thinking that I was giving all of this love and all of this admiration and really trying to show up in people's lives, I failed to realize that I was neglecting myself, right? And so creating boundaries in friendships look like, for me, the first time that my spirit, that some people call it woman intuition, some people call it the Spirit of God, the Holy Ghost, some people call it a itch. Once I get that itch that you are not the person that I should be yoked with, you are not a friend that means well for me, or there is something underlined that is not conducive for a relationship or building a relationship with you, I need to exit stage right. Not the second, the third, the fifth, maybe the second, not the fifth, the seventh, eighth, 10th time of you showing me, A, you're not who you say you are. But soon as I get that itch, I need to exit stage right. Because something that I do wholeheartedly believe in, obedience is better than sacrifice. I have suffered so much tremendously in friendships because I did not heed that obedience is better than sacrifice. God will tell you who is supposed to be in your life. God will show you. You will feel it, right? You will feel it, right? And so creating boundaries, like I said, was exiting stage right when stuff didn't feel right in friendships. Also, communicating my expectations, right? Communicating if something set off with me, communicating if my feelings was hurt, communicating, and don't be afraid to communicate because you're afraid that that person may walk away. If that person walks away, then that person was never meant for you in the first place. And that was one of my biggest fears, because you have to think about it. I felt neglected early on at a young age. I felt ostracized. I felt different. I felt like something had to be wrong with me, right? So losing people, that was a fear, right? Also, the fact that I lost my mother at such a young age, at the age of 13, even though my mother didn't want to die, I felt abandoned by my mother. And that's something that I had to sit with myself and be real about, right? I lost the woman that was my entire world, right? And now I'm trying to have relationships that, quite frankly, will never add up to my mother. But I'm trying to cultivate something, but I'm holding on to unhealthy relationships that I should have been let go. Friends that really don't like me for me, but they like the benefits that come with me, right? And so that's how I had to create boundaries in my platonic relationships, okay? So now we're going to get a little deep, right? And I may even do a second part to this, and then I can go and dissect it even more. We're going to move on to romantic relationships, right? And I'm gonna let y'all a little bit in my business, okay? Not too much, but a little bit in my business. So when it came to romantic relationships, something that I realized that I would often attract was emotionally unavailable men, right? And some say, well, if you attract emotionally unavailable men, then you must be emotionally unavailable. I disagree. Maybe in some aspects of who you are emotionally unavailable, but it doesn't always have to be like that. I realized I had to come to the conclusion where I learned emotional unavailability in a man was my father, right? I truly do believe the first man that a young girl falls in love with is her father, right? The image of her father, the relationship of her father, the energy of her father, right? And so I had to come to the conclusion that I was attracting emotionally unavailable men because that's what I seen modeled to me, right? My dad was a provider, but anything emotionally, my dad does not deal with. Very passive when it comes to certain things, right? Me and my dad have the same types of conversations every single day or every time we talk. How are you doing? I'm doing well. I'm doing, God is good. I'm alive. I'm breathing. Everything's good. Dad, is anything bothering you? I had this one thing, but everything's great. I'm fine. You have to give thanks. You have to be happy. You have to be, it's very evasive when it comes to his emotions, right? And so I was meeting men that were emotionally unavailable. And instead of realizing, hey, these men are emotionally unavailable, go find men or go make yourself available for emotionally available men, I would play therapist, right? Or not just therapist, I would therapist. I would pour out myself because I knew that they were lacking aspects that they truly desired, and that in the form of emotional intelligence, right? So I was giving of myself thinking, oh, this was my younger 20s thinking, oh, that'll make him like me more if I show how much more I can be available, how much more accessible I can be, how much more understanding I can be, right? And I think this is a game that we play, right? With thinking, well, if we present ourselves in this way, right, to be a therapist, sometimes a lot of these men have mommy issues. So you're damn near playing mommy and trying to figure out their life for them, that these men will stay. These men will find solace and understanding in us, right? And then they will grow expansively, right? But I truly believe that is work to be done for every individual, right? Emotional intelligence is something that you have to hone yourself. Dealing with your traumas and dealing with your pain pockets as to why you can't express the emotions, the full range of emotions, has to be something that you're attending to. No one can come in your life and play God, right? And so I found myself playing positions that I was not supposed to be playing. Trying to be liked, right? And I think every woman at some point, or not every woman, or women who have had certain traumas, start to people please, start to move in a space of desperation. Because at the end of the day, we all want love, right? We're all seeking love. Even people that are some of the most hateful people, right? They are hateful because they are without love. Love to me is one of the most powerful things as humans that we can share with one another, that we can cultivate for one another, that we can bring to one another, right? And so I found myself in this space of like desperation. Now, the level of desperations, what I'm saying, I was never like just, but for me, it was definitely it was definitely a red flag, but it also was a big sign on my forehead telling guys, oh yeah, she desperate. You know what I'm saying? And for the longest, I didn't realize that, right? And so creating boundaries for me romantically was more so about when I see a man that's emotionally unavailable, because I do not want to repeat the same habits that my mother did with my father, I don't engage, right? If I see a man I will give a man love, some respect, some consideration, but to sit there and pour and pour and pour into someone who has not yet identified the issues within themselves or identified the issues enough to change it and to want to work on it, I realized that was not my portion, right? So creating boundaries looked like, I don't like men that have no rhyme of reason for being in my life, being in my time too long, calling me all day, talking to me, draining my energy, wanting to always know what I'm doing, but you don't have no rhyme of reason of why you're here. You don't have no real intention for me. You don't have no real reason as to why you're pursuing me. You're just pursuing me without a cause. You're being vague. You're not being honest. You're not being transparent. And so I learned how to cut interaction, right? I am seen when I want to be seen, right? I am present when I want to be present. And it's not a game that is being played, but it's more so a thing of, if your intentions were pure, you would be in my energy and my space more, right? But because you're not, I set up these boundaries. I also have set up boundaries of, I've been in many different situations. Men have been married, have tried to talk to me, flirt with me. Men, and I find that to be insulting, by the way. I've been in different situations, so I make it very clear, if you're married, you're in any type of relationship, are you emotionally unavailable? I make it very clear what my standards are. I am a woman who is waiting for marriage. I am a woman who is seeking to build a solid relationship that is built on love, trust, respect, partnership, honesty, transparency. So I make it very clear to men what I'm looking for. I will turn a man down. Look, I'm looking for marriage. If that's not what you own, then I'm probably not the tree you should be barking up. So I just became very clear in what it is that I want, right? So romantically, that is something that I've done to create boundaries, because with men specifically, hear me out, ladies. If you don't know who you are and what you want, a man will run amok on you. I'm going to say that again for those in the back. Ladies, if you don't know who you are and what you want and truly desire out of a relationship, a man will run amok on you. Okay? So that is something that I have learned, is to be very precise in who I am, what I want, what my intentions are. And for those that think I'm too intense, for those that think I'm too much, that's good. Go for a weaker vessel. Go for someone who fits your narrative and what you want, right? And so that's how I've created boundaries romantically, okay? Fast forward to, which I feel like has been, if not the challenge, the most challenging, one of the most challenging things to create boundaries with, and that is family. Blood family, even the family that you choose, child. Even the family that you choose, excuse me. The family that you choose and your blood family can be the hardest to create boundaries with, because it's so much time, it's so much investment, it's so much of them knowing you forever that creates this dynamic of almost somewhat of toxic bonds, this codependency in relationships. And so when it came to family, I really had to get people straight on how I will and not be treated. You will not speak to me any kind of way. You will not disregard my feelings when it is you feel it's applicable. You will not treat me any kind of way, but then still have access to me. And when Kendrick Lamar said, I cut my grandma off if she don't see it how I see it. Love you, grandma. But we definitely have went through some things. But I'm serious. It's a serious thing, because you'll find yourself living in anguish at the fault of what somebody else did, right? And let me also say this. Setting boundaries is not easy. For the first 3-4 years of me setting boundaries with people, do you not know that I felt like I was doing something wrong? I felt like I was committing a sin to myself. The amount of pain and the amount of emotion that it felt just to do right by me. I felt wrong doing that. So I want y'all to understand, creating boundaries is not this easy thing. For the first time of you creating boundaries, for some years, maybe even, it's going to take you some time to feel, especially if you've been heavy in people pleasing, it's going to take you some time to feel comfortable with setting healthy boundaries. And it's nothing wrong with that. So going back to setting boundaries with family, I had to get people straight. I had to tell people about themselves. I had to say, no, not today. I had to say, no, that doesn't work for me. Right? I had to figure out what truly worked for me, right? And I had to realize that even if I lose, and this is for platonic, romantic, even if I lose everyone in my life and I still had me, that's all that I would need in God. Right? I had to realize that because people get comfortable with disrespect. People get comfortable with not having boundaries. And then when you create them, it's like it's World War III. So especially with my family, right? Even my chosen family, I had a situation where I parted ways with my sister, which I have her on an episode, for a year and a half. And honestly, that was the best thing that I could have ever done. And we both agreed after that year and a half, that it really solidified and took away the unwanted strings that we had with each other, the toxicness that we had. It really gave clarity to our relationship. And especially with family, like I said, even my blood family with my grandmother. Me and my grandmother have went through some things. We have argued like cats and dogs. It has not been always easy, right? But I think through me creating boundaries, and I'm going to end it like this, through me creating boundaries, I have taught my family, my friends, how to better love themselves. And I want to say this, a lot of times we think that people learn through what you say. And this is something that I had to learn. We think that people learn through what you say, even children, right? It's a saying that do as I say, not as I do, right? Which is incorrect teaching, right? When you think about, because as humans, we learn through human behavior, right? And so through me demonstrating the act of love within myself to say, these are my boundaries. Either you're going to take it or you're going to leave it. But these are my boundaries and they're here to stay. I was able to better teach people how to love themselves and how to not disregard themselves when it came to other people, and also how to love me and how to treat me. Because honestly, we got to teach people how to treat us. We got to teach people how to love us, right? It ain't no sense in going through your life and never knowing, and people never knowing how to love you, how to support you, how to show up for you, because you don't communicate it, right? And so I hope and pray that you guys have learned something in this episode of the art of setting boundaries, because it is something that is so important. It is something that I'm taking into this new season of my life. And I hope that you guys were able to grab nuggets and learn from the different things that I've had to endure and how I've turned it all around, y'all. So this has been another episode of AVOR Podcast. If you have not, hit that subscribe button so you can stay tuned for more episodes. This is a labor of love for me. And so I hope that you guys were able to learn something from this, and it's been real.
So this has been another episode of the AVOR Podcast. If you have not subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow me, the host, Wasila Giwa, on all platforms. And also follow AVOR on all platforms at AVOR Podcast. Beat provided by Esquire, one of the greatest to ever do it. And we're going to keep these episodes rolling. And until next time, love ya. Peace. Peace.